Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to day 2 of our Emergency Online Wedding Business Summit, looking at all things COVID-19. So today I have a very special guest. It's somebody who I think quite a few of you have been hanging out to hear from, mainly because of the legality side of things. So I'm being joined by Caroline from Engaged Legal, and Caroline is essentially somebody who knows anything and everything to do with the legal side of things. She is a lawyer. She works specifically within the wedding and event industry. And trust me, she can tell you everything you need to know about legally forming and operating a wedding and event business. And she's spoken at lots of different conferences within our industry. She's been to events speaking at places like Wedding Wire, NACE, the Rising Tide Society Destination Wedding Planning Conference. So it's safe to say she knows her stuff. So Caroline, welcome. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to chat with me today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm sad that it's under these conditions, but I'm really glad to be able to be here and talk kind of through what everybody's going through right now.
Well, I know we've had a lot of questions ourselves. As the Academy, people kind of look to us to be the answer to everything. And as I said yesterday, I'd love to say I'm the font of all knowledge, but there's certain things I really don't know. So I guess my very first question to you would be, what does COVID do to the contract side of things, you know, in general terms? If you can sort of shed some light on it, that would be great to get us started off.
Absolutely. So we're in an unprecedented situation, as most people know. This is really not something that we, especially in Western cultures, have really had to deal with since the 1900s. You know, so no one really knows 1, 2, 3, 4. There's no like specific sequence of how this is all going to go down. However, a lot of the things that we're seeing and that we're talking about and trying to kind of give people information on is that COVID obviously is going to affect the event industry. It's going to affect the contracts that you have with your clients. So one of the ways it can do that, it's by triggering different provisions in your contract. If you have a well-drafted contract, you may have information on emergencies, on force majeure, on cancellations and postponements. If it's been kind of, if it's been written into your contract, you will have like a flow chart of how to handle it. However, not many people have pandemic written into their force majeure provisions.
Yeah, and I think that's what people are really worried about. I think, I mean, a lot of people have got what they should, in a clause, have force majeure in their contract, but I'm not awfully sure that everybody knows what it is. So maybe if you can shed some light on what it is, and then if you can sort of shed light on, are they actually in force majeure, and how do they know if they're there?
Right, absolutely, and it's a great question. And force majeure is essentially a contract clause that helps you deal with unforeseeable events. It helps you deal with the things that maybe we're not going to necessarily be able to name super specifically, but we know that there are these kind of things that float outside of our control or either party's control. Yeah. This came to be because we have these like ye merry old England kind of rules that most Western law has incorporated that are called contractual impossibility and contractual frustration. Those are some very, very, very narrow kind of construction of a legal concept where like you literally cannot perform this contract under any means because of like X, Y, and Z. We're going to put that over there on the table for a minute, and we're going to talk about force majeure because it came out of that. It is a way to contract, to actually put into effect a broader contractual agreement about what's going to happen if unforeseeable events make it really, really difficult, if not impossible, to perform. Now, force majeure is written into your contracts to usually include specific circumstances. Circumstances that we normally see are fire, flood, civil insurrection. We've seen a lot more, any sort of, you know, emergency situations or government mandate is usually in there. And then you'll also sometimes see a broadening clause or a more restrictive clause, honestly, because depending on where you're located, it says, or other emergencies or act of God, or other acts of God, that kind of situation. So it's painful to say this, but every contract is going to be different. So what you need to do is you need to get your contract out, and you need to read that force majeure clause and say, like, all right, what are the specific instances that I have named in this contract? What are all the things? Okay, we have fire, we have flood, we have civil instructions. Have I named pandemic? No, you probably haven't. Like, that's something that we've cut a lot of people cut out, right? Yeah. And unless you typically do deal with, maybe supply chain, maybe you have some sort of maybe you're not in event production or photography or anything like that, but maybe you are in linens and you have supply chain issues, and maybe you do have pandemics because you work with third world countries, something like that. So that's different. Yeah. Right. You might have pandemic in there. It's going to depend on what you guys put in there and what your lawyer put in there. But if you don't have pandemic, probably don't, you are going to want to look for government mandate or acts of government, because that will be when your force majeure clause will kick in. So that means when, like in the US, we've got all of our government kind of saying, you guys need to stay put for events bigger than X. You need to shelter in place. I know obviously Italy's got stuff going on. I don't know what France is doing right now, but we're kind of all...
We're on lockdown. We're not allowed to leave our house. In fact, we're not even allowed to speak to our neighbours and be within 200 yards of them. I know, it's ridiculous right now, but that's the reality of what we're dealing with here in France. The UK isn't on lockdown at the moment. They're being advised to not go out and go to various different places, but I think it's changing all the time. So it really is different dependent upon where you're located.
Exactly. And it's going to be different. And that kind of reflects back into the contract situation too, because force majeure will only kick in under those specific circumstances. So you're looking at things like, are we on government lockdown right now? Are we on government lockdown until this person's event? If you have an event this weekend, obviously, that's probably, if you have force majeure written in as a government mandate and there's an event this weekend, that's probably going to count. That's probably going to be a situation where it counts. But if it's in June and it's an overabundance of caution and they're going to try and move it, that force majeure clause might not be actually in effect at that point. So when we say it's very factual, that's what we mean. So what might, in a way, the way that we think legally, like the way that you learn to think when you go to law school, is set out all the specific facts, set out all the terms that your contract requires, and then cross-reference them and see if they're hit yet. If they're cross-referenced and there's a government mandate, their event is in the exact time, their event is covered by, especially in the US, if your event was 10 people, you might not be covered right now. So if their event is more than X number of people and you can check all those boxes, that's when your force majeure clause will kick in.
So with the government mandate side of things, how do you know if that's written into that force majeure clause? How do you know it's there? Will it be specifically written words, government mandate?
Yeah, acts of government mandate, anything that says the government has put you on lockdown, anything that can be...
That would be nice if it was that specific, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's okay, anything where... If it's written in there like that, that's going to be kind of what it'll have to be written in there. Force majeure is very, very narrow. That being said, I did mention a few minutes ago and promised to come back on it. You have these other kind of out there, not written down rules for contractual impossibility, contractual frustration, depending on your location, your country, your state even. These are going to have, again, very narrow, but very different rules as well. So we have not had to deal with seeing how, at least in America, we haven't seen how these are going to play out in a court system in a very, very, very long time. I can't look at a situation and say like, oh yeah, here's a line of case law that shows how pandemic happens when we have events like this, when we do that. This is how frustration and impossibility is going to play out.
Reference point, then you've got nothing to refer back to like you normally would.
Right. So it's very difficult, even for us as lawyers, trying to look through this. I mean, I have a few other lawyer compatriots that are in this industry, and we're texting back and forth. We're calling each other, being like, what do you think about this? Have you found anything? Like, do you have any supporting documents that you could send me to?
Yeah.
We're doing the same thing, just trying to kind of like go through this Plinko chart of where are our clients and what are they doing and how can we help them best? So it's, as much as we would love to give a hard line in the sand about what you have to do, there isn't one right now. We just don't have one. No. So one of the things that I have been encouraging, and I think that this is very helpful for people because it will give you time. It will essentially buy you time. I mean, so everyone in the event industry is saying postpone, postpone, postpone. Like, yes, on board with that. I am saying for your events that they're not in a force majeure situation yet. They're not in a possibility situation. We don't think, maybe they're in April, May, June. They're not in this mandate window of lockdown. I'm really encouraging people to have their if you don't have a good contract in place, get one in place, like find one, get one. And then get a postponement in writing, because if you're already postponing, and this is a little bit tricky and a little bit gray, but if we are talking about postponing indefinitely versus having a force majeure clause kick in and then maybe maybe having to refund more money, maybe like only getting to keep specific amounts of money, it's a better option on the business side for you as a business owner to postpone indefinitely until you can come to some sort of like hard line, like this is when we're actually doing it, than to wait until you are possibly in a force majeure situation, have less control over what you keep versus what you don't, and then maybe lose the contract entirely. So you cannot unilaterally force them to postpone, but if you can get them to sign off on some sort of agreement that says, we want to work together. We are in unprecedented times right now, subject to both of our availability, but using best efforts, that's a big one. Yeah. In a commercially reasonable manner, because commercially reasonable, it's going to be tough. Right? That's going to be something that's important to put in there too. We want to revisit this and find a date that works for both of us. Good wording.
That's the type of wording that you would use within a postponement agreement.
Yeah, that's the type of wording what at least all of my compatriots and I are seeing and trying to use and trying to push towards. Again, we don't know if that's going to 100% work. But for what we can see, what has worked in the past, and like the information that we all have right now, that's what we're pushing people towards, because that's going to give you the best opportunity. That being said, every situation is different. It's going to depend on your own.
As you said, everybody's got different contracts. We've got Melina here, who's in Italy, and she's asking, is the pandemic an act of God?
Great question. Maybe. We don't know.
This is the hard part, isn't it? There's no easy answer to this particular question, because again, it's unprecedented.
Exactly. I mean, if you're in Italy, you obviously have a lot of restrictions right now. I am not honestly hanging my hat on other acts of God, honestly, just because a government lockdown necessarily is not an act of God. That's technically like an act of humans.
Yeah, that's a human decision.
It's a human decision.
In your control, not out of your control, I guess.
Right, it is. And so I'm not really I'm trying to stay away from, okay, is this an act of God or not? Like, I'm trying to go into alternate routes where we have that kind of like, all right, government mandate. Okay, we don't have that yet. So that's kind of what I'm seeing. That being said, I think we're going to see a lot of different decisions on that, which is why I'm just encouraging people postpone. as much as you can, because we don't know the answers.
Okay, well, there's not much more we can say on that one, other than it sounds like it's highly likely that, or unlikely, that a pandemic is going to be treated as an act of God, but you never know.
Right, we don't know.
Out of the realm of what would be possible under normal circumstances, but this is not normal circumstances.
Yeah.
So we've also got Tanielle, who's saying, hi, in the instance that a contract does not have a force majeure clause, would the cancellation policy apply? For instance, the wedding is this weekend and the client wishes to cancel, giving only 72 hours notice. Per contract clause, cancellation policy apply whereby no refund will be due to the client. So I think what she's asking is, she doesn't have a force majeure. Can her cancellation policy come into effect in this particular instance, based on the fact that obviously they're cancelling because they've got no choice, because it's now. It falls within what you were talking about the whole government side of things, but as she doesn't have a force majeure clause, she can't rely on that. So is she within her rights to implement the cancellation clause?
Yeah, I think that will definitely depend on the regulations of where you are. If there is...
Yeah, it doesn't say where she is, Sama. Sama, if you're still listening, can you tell us where you are? It would be quite interesting to know, because it might make a difference.
Yeah, it might make a difference. And also, I've gotten a lot of questions about different states and different places where they are. It's really all I can do to keep on top of like my area. So like Virginia, North Carolina, Maryland, DC. So I've had to tell people, like, I don't know the answer because I don't know what your regs are right now and what your government mandates are. It also depends by town. Like, it can depend by town or by city. So you need to be looking at those as well. For example, our town, our city has certain regulations that the police department are enforcing, but they are different and a bit more restrictive than our state rules. So there's that to consider too. I would say in a situation like this, they want to cancel, well, because there's a PR aspect too, right? We have to think through. I mean, I've already seen and gotten emails about, like, now I have a terrible review. Now they're giving me 1 star, that kind of thing. So,
isn't it? But at the end of the day, you're also running a business too. There's a fine line between being sympathetic and wanting to help your clients, and also still being in business in 6 months' time, because you can't do that for everybody. And this person is cancelling 72 hours prior to the event. So under normal circumstances, her cancellation policy or clause would say no refund. But in this case, again, it's a little hard, because I'm sure that cancellation policy has never been put to the test in this type of way. And she's based in Brooklyn.
Yeah, and Kylie, you've said that so well. Like, that, you just really articulated that well. We haven't had this situation happen. I know Brooklyn is like definitely kind of in a lockdown area right now. I actually was supposed to be in Brooklyn today. I'm glad
you're speaking with us.
I know. I would have come and hung out with you. But so it looks to me, the answer is I don't know. I mean, I'm not too proud to admit, like, I don't know the answer to that question right now. What I would encourage you to do as a business owner is get something in writing. Again, push them to postpone. Say, hey, if you want to postpone, we'll give you some sort of deal sweetener. I don't know, like whatever you can't, extra hours of coverage, maybe like some sort of something. If they don't accept that, like this is something I wanted to touch on here too, because I've had a little bit more time to think it through. And I haven't really started talking about this yet, but if you do end up having to give refunds, right? Like maybe it's half, maybe it's everything but your non-refundable deposit, because again, it does also really, really depend on what your non-refundable clause looks like and how it was drafted, and if it was drafted well. Because non-refundable deposit clauses, believe it or not, are very, very difficult to keep, even on a good day. So I would say it depends a lot on the industry.
Sorry to interrupt. She's just posted in the comments. I should have articulated that client is not open to the postponement situation. So it looks like postponement is completely off the table for this particular client. So I'm guessing she only has the cancellation policy clause and that's it.
Yeah. I think these are the situations that we're definitely not gonna know the answers to these. And I think that we're gonna have to wait for them to play out. Honestly, we're gonna have to wait and see how courts treat them. I would say that, like, because you are kind of in a, is it impossible? Is it not? Like, we're falling out of that broader force majeure clause into more of a, that narrower impossibility area. Like, is it absolutely impossible to have any sort of event whatsoever? Like, probably not. So you probably are going to fall back on that cancellation clause, and that's what it, like, legally operating, that's probably what it's going to look like. Is the event going to be substantially different? Yeah, it would be. But I don't know. In that situation, I think you're also really just going to need to take into account, what does it look like? Are they litigious? Which means, do you think that they're going to sue you? Depending on what,
got to come into some point, doesn't it? You have to consider how far this couple might be likely to go. And that's going to have a bearing on the decision that you make.
Right.
Well, that obviously is a difficult question to answer. And as you said, there's no one straight hard and fast rule for this force majeure clause, for cancellation clauses, or anything like this. I guess we need to talk about money, because obviously most people will have accepted deposits, if not got to the point where they're at their, if they charge in 25% increments, they're probably at that 75% point. And I know certainly from a planner's perspective, once they're at that point, they've done the majority of the work. The final 25% really is for showing up on the day. So what advice can you give when it comes to clients cancelling when they're not in force majeure, and also when they are? Because obviously they're two different things, aren't they, when it comes to the whole payment side of things and money?
Yeah. A lot of this is going to be different based on the type of service you're offering.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, if we think about, like you just mentioned, planners have done a majority of their work up front, right?
This is the thing.
Yeah, they've done that. You can show that. In a worst case scenario, you get sued, you can at least show, like, a ton of the stuff that you've done up front. Caterers, if they've ordered stuff and they can't necessarily mitigate, which you're supposed to be trying to fix, trying to help and fix the situation. You can't if they can't recoup all the losses, all that kind of stuff. You're going to be able to keep some things to compensate you for that. If we look at photographers, who most of your work, their work is the day of and after in post-production, their story is going to look a little bit different and play out a little bit differently, just because of the compensation portion. I mean, yes, we do have liquidated damages clauses, and which are your non-refundable deposits. Yes, we do have, pro rata compensation on cancellation. But again, if your contract's not super specific and you don't have that in writing, we kind of are going to have to start making some really tough decisions. And one of the things that I haven't really talked about that much, and I was really excited to talk to you about, is, okay, maybe we're in a situation where we're saying we're making this business decision to refund X number of dollars. We are, gonna do X, Y, and Z to try and make things easier on our couples. If you were refunding, say your contract sucks and you have no right to keep anything, and we're in a worst case scenario, right?
Yeah. Unless
your contract says you have to refund everything within 10 days, which I'm sure it doesn't, because if you hadn't thought about all this before, like, you can refund over time,
Right. Okay.
We don't have to refund immediately tomorrow. we can just be like, all right, we're going to refund in increments. We can't do this all right now. We have to spread out, spread the love among our couples. We have to temper our operational costs. We have to do this in a way that doesn't bankrupt us or send us under. Do that over time. If you have, now, I'm assuming if you don't have like the force majeure clause, the cancellation, all this stuff set up, you probably don't have that clause saying you have to refund within 30 days or something like that. So if you do, obviously there's something different in there, but I'm going to assume if it's not addressed, period, then it's not. So look at your contract and see, and then just kind of, I'm encouraging people to really think about the PR implications and the business side of it, because there's legal, but we also really got to weigh that business side.
Yeah, which is so important, because at the end of the day, you still want to have a business at the end of all of this. But what you're saying is that essentially it is okay to spread those refund payments if you get into that scenario, which I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't be aware of. It would be that panic of, oh my God, how am I going to find X amount of dollars to pay back to this client, and this client, if they're going to be insisting on cancelling and wanting refunds. But if you can spread that cost, then that does make it a little bit easier. And as you say, you can then start to think about those PR implications and what that's going to do to your business reputation as you move forward. It is such a fine line, because at the end of the day, you have to be earning money. And of course, even postponing is causing people issues, because what dates are they going to postpone them to?
Yeah.
That's
the question. And like, are all vendors available that day? And so that's when it gets a little bit tricky as well. I really like the option of spreading out refund payments over time, because also, like, if we end up in a worst case situation where we end up, somebody ends up in court, the couple ends up suing people, you put yourself in a really good position, because you can tell a court, like, I have been trying to work with them, we're doing all we can. We've said we're going to refund over this period of time. And it just puts you in a starting position where you look better. Like, you look like you have been trying. Yeah. And that's what, in a situation where we're judging on fairness and we don't have clauses and all that stuff, the better you can look going into it, the less angry a judge is going to be. Like, honestly, they can be kind of crafty. So you want to look good. And that's, honestly, it's like kind of like PR to judges. It's like, we're doing all we can. We're trying to help. We're trying to pay our employees, but also pay back people. So that's something that I have been thinking through how to articulate over the past 24 hours. And I was really excited to be able to jump on here and talk through that too.
No, I think that's a great one, because it's not one I'd thought of, about the fact that you would even be able to do that. Whether or not it would be legal to do that, I guess, is having that option will definitely, I think, make that a lot easier for quite a few people. But another question that I've got is about responsibility from the wedding pros point of view when a contract is cancelled or postponed. So what are their responsibilities within a scenario like that?
When a cancellation happens, we have to think, or a postponement happens, you are, as a individual business, anybody, you're responsible for mitigating those damages, like the mitigating word. That means that, okay, you have an event in 2 weeks and we're still obviously, kind of on lockdown. Somebody wants to cancel or postpone. Your job is to try and help in ways that you can. It's not like, oh, well, we're going to continue to order flowers and florals and show up and do this. Like, your job is to try and assist in the situation if possible. That's a very kind of out there legal duty, but that looks different for everybody. If you're a caterer, don't order a ton of food if you know there's not going to be an event. And then maybe, if you can, maybe refund that amount. Even if your contract says it's non-refundable, maybe refund that amount. Because maybe you've done the work up front of preparing the menus, ordering the stuff, getting things straight, doing all that. But if you can, you should be, it's arguable that you have a responsibility to try and kind of like temper that loss.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I guess as well, you know, there's so, I mean, like you said, it really does depend on the individual vendor and what they're doing. I mean, as planners, obviously, part of their role is to problem solve and try and sort that type of thing out. But from a catering perspective, potentially from a floral perspective as well, if you might not actually be able to get the items. So I guess that was another question that I had, was not so much whether or not the actual events are being cancelled, but what if you can't actually get the items you were contracted to get? So for example, a floral designer, she may well be ordering her flowers, let's say from Holland. We get a lot of ours from Holland, and nothing is being delivered. The ferries have closed right now. As of this morning, our ferries aren't running. So what if you can't get the actual flowers? What if you can't get some of the products you need in order to make the wedding cake or to provide the catering for the event? How do you stand legally then?
Oh, yeah. I mean, a lot of it is going to depend on your contract again. It should.
Yeah, individual contract.
Yeah, it should. We should have in a contract like this, it should say like commercial impossibility or things like that. We should have that addressed. Okay, but so if we don't, we're gonna just kind of be looking at, are you in a force majeure situation? If you are, then you're excused or you can postpone, because force majeure, most of the time you can excuse or postpone performance. Like those are usually two good options. Postponement is usually included there, or there is a delay in performance because of that. So that would probably end up falling in there. If you can't get it, and just because of supply chain issues that maybe are not caused by that. I mean, it's hard. It's really hard because it looks kind of like a breach if you haven't addressed situations like that in your contract. But postponement may work. You may be able to postpone, and that might be a legal remedy that you're, because it is impossible, even if it's, God, it's so fact specific. I wish I had a better answer. I really wish I had better answers. It's just kind of like, look at your contract.
Can't help it though, can we? Because you're not sat there with a specific contract in front of you to be able to answer those questions, I guess is the problem. So Sylvia's saying best practices may include sending clients monthly statements. I think she's talking about the refund over time, showing work done like lawyers and their billable hours. I guess that would be an option. That sounds like quite a smart thing to do.
Absolutely. And that is what it looks like, a pro rata refund. And that's something that you may have written in or may not, or, liquidated damages as compensation and not as a penalty. That's like a phrase that I love to use in my contracts. But so being able to show that's another reason why we really like time logging. And in a perfect situation, I encourage my clients to log time, or at least keep track of stuff a little bit. Maybe it doesn't need to be 100% specific, but from an accounting perspective, that's a great idea. From a legal perspective, that's a great idea. Because you also have these claims of, oh, well, they didn't actually do anything, so they shouldn't get to keep, especially in like that photographer perspective. Maybe you did go to a site visit and plan out stuff. Like, you can at least show that there's been some sort of work done, that it's the date reservation, that you've prepped, or you've ordered specific equipment. That's going to be really helpful too. And it's going to be really helpful in these situations with relief funds that have been set up. So being able to track those expenses and show what has happened over time to your business financially, that's going to be important there too.
Well, that sounds like a really smart idea that Sylvia's come up with.
Great job, Sylvia.
So Randy's asked, here's a good one. What about if other vendors are cancelling? I'm a venue and we have caterers cancelling outside of current mandate, but we can still proceed. Hold on, I was going to show that one.
That's cool.
proceed services. I know, I only discovered this yesterday by mistake when my finger hit something by mistake. And I just realized that I can actually bring questions up on screen. So there you go. Now you can see the question.
Oh,
so
cool.
brand is a venue. They've got caterers that are cancelling outside of the current mandate, but the venue themselves are still allowed to proceed. So that sounds like it would be an interesting one. I'll remove that again now.
I mean, honestly, if you're outside the mandate and people are canceling outside, like, give your clients the option to postpone if they want, because if you're not required to cancel and there's no mandate, you're not in a force majeure situation yet. I honestly have a flow chart on our website. It's kind of like, where do we fall along this spectrum? And if you are outside the mandate and you can still have an event, I mean, even though it's not necessarily the most advisable thing to do, I don't
from a contractual perspective, they wouldn't really have a leg to stand on. So at the end of the day, as long as they're still, I would imagine, as long as the venue is still willing to go ahead with it, then it's the client's decision to cancel. And I would imagine that the caterers are contracted directly to the client, not to the venue. So because they're an outside supplier. So again, I'm guessing that's another one where you really need to know the specifics of what is actually within the contract, which is a little bit hard.
And I would say there, if it's close, like if you're in the next 2 months, maybe consider giving them the option to postpone, because if you get pushed into that situation where there's a force majeure and your contract's not clear on what you keep and what you don't, like, you would be in a better position to have a postponement that says, like, we're going to this date, or even if you don't know the date, just get as many terms as possible as you can and do that, like, best efforts, commercially reasonable language, because you're probably giving yourself a better chance of not having to refund if it's if we're at a shorter time frame in between now and the event.
Fair enough. And we've got one last question before I let you go, because I know you're busy and you're probably having a ton of questions thrown at you right now. Sama has said, I'm a photographer. Many of my couples are postponing but are unsure of when they will be able to find a date to hold their wedding because of things like moving or starting a residency. Should there be a time limit in place for a postponement agreement? So obviously you've been talking about the wording to put into a postponement agreement and leaving it as fluid as you can. But actually, let me just pop that up so people can hear it. That's covering your face. I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine. I'm also like sleeping.
So yeah, it's more about whether or not there is a time limit as far as postponement is concerned. And couples are hoping to set 2021 dates, but what if it goes on to 2022? I won't be able to book those dates and my rates will most likely increase by 2022. I don't have a good postponement clause in my contract at this time. So that's an interesting one.
Yeah. Okay. So what I would say is you can get in writing, like I was talking about before, if you don't know when it's postponed, you can get in writing that you guys are both going to use best efforts, which is important, for commercially reasonable dates to find those out. And then you can also add in there, like, if we can't come to a resolution, then it's going to be considered a cancellation. I would imagine your original contract does address like flat out cancellations.
Yeah.
So there you're kind of setting yourself up. We're going to try and figure it out. But if they decide that it's not going to work out, it's a cancellation. And like, I've done all I can. Is that going to be 100% effective? Maybe, maybe not, depending on your underlying contract that you did sign. It also might be a good chance to get a good contract in place, kind of cancel that first contract completely, and then get an offer to like transfer all their money that's been paid and get a good contract in place that does address those situations. But then for the date, have something like parties agree to use best efforts to agree on or to come to a mutually agreeable date. And then that way you're kind of building that stronger contract underneath and giving yourself a good foundation to work from. While
we do have a cancellation clause. So there is a cancellation clause there. So you wouldn't suggest putting a time, not limit, but sort of a time span within that postponement agreement. So you wouldn't say within best efforts within a 6-month period, for example. Would you say that would be advisable?
Yeah, and this isn't a legal perspective. This is more just a trying to figure out the situation perspective. I honestly wouldn't limit it to 6 months just because what is your availability? You're going to be rescheduling a lot of people. What does that look like? I would give them more time. You can absolutely put a time limit on it. However, you did mention something about like your rates are going to be higher, blah, blah, blah. We can't like keep a contract in place, but then be like, oh, but my rates are going to be higher now, so you're going to have to pay me more. Yeah. That's probably not going to be like an enforceable thing or something that they're even going to sign, honestly. I mean, maybe we could write it into a contract, but if they're reading it at this point, they're going to be looking for that kind of stuff. So I don't necessarily know if that's a great idea to actually execute this and get this done, because what we want to do is like take care of the situations as quickly as possible, work with our clients, keep them happy, avoid getting bad reviews like she was so hard to work with during coronavirus.
Yeah, that's not good PR. That is definitely not what you want.
Right. Yeah. So it's maybe you do have the right to do this, but can we try and work it out so that we're helping everybody involved and avoiding potential legal pushback? Because I do think there's going to be a lot of, unfortunately, legal fallout, because especially with your higher end weddings.
Yeah. Although I've heard that actually a lot of the higher end clients are the ones that aren't that worried about it. And maybe that's because they have more budget and more money available, that it's not quite in the same sort of realm as somebody who is more budget conscious and, obviously really look after the pennies, so to speak. Okay, so I do just want to round this up, because I do think that this, rightly or wrongly, is a really good opportunity for people to start really looking at their contracts, because I know certainly from my perspective, when I speak to people, they just don't put enough time and effort into their contracts. It's something, oh yeah, it'll be fine. Yeah, I've just got a standard contract. That'll be all right. But if this has shown us anything, it's that your contract is unbelievably important, because you just never know when an event or a pandemic, as we are in, like this is going to happen. So if you could give people 5 top tips on what you would do in order to really overhaul your contract, or more than that, if there's more than that, just, things they can be doing to safeguard themselves in the future, if anything unprecedented, I won't say another pandemic, because let's hope we don't have another one, but something unprecedented happens, what can they do to make sure they're in the best possible situation?
Yeah. I mean, I will say, I'll give these, but I want to start out by saying, like, don't kick yourself if your contract isn't great right now, or it doesn't address this, because like, I mean, my day job, lawyering, at my law firm, I'm going through Fortune 500 contracts that haven't quite figured out this situation. So don't kick yourself too much. I mean, obviously it's something that we've been preaching for a long time, but we're here now, we got to move forward. So the first thing I would say is, if you can afford it, find a lawyer in your area who can help you, because they're the ones who are going to know how your area treats certain things, what the rulings look like, what's customary in your state, town, locality, country, anything. And they're the ones that, like, we go to school for a really long time to be able to do this. If you can afford it, for sure, 10 times out of 10, go see a lawyer, especially one that is experienced in your industry, so in the events industry. The next thing I would say, though, that's not always a financial option for people, and 100% get it. Like, I understand that. The reason I started the Engage Legal Collective is to provide helpful templates, like contract templates, and we have a postponement template up right now, like, for people who maybe can't dedicate the financial resources at first, and when they're starting. So find a resource like that. There are a bunch of template, like lawyer drafted template resources out there. You know, I'm friends with Paige of Legal Page, Rachel Brinke of the Law Talk, Christina Scalera does stuff at the Contract Shop. You know, there are options available to you. So invest in one of those contracts, because they're at least going to give you like a more structured and comprehensive look than just kind of having like stuff everywhere. Maybe it addresses it, maybe it doesn't. The next thing is think through, and this is as a positive and like glass half full person, I promise I'm very positive in most situations, but think through worst case scenarios. Think through the zombie apocalypse. Pretend your clients are awful people and they're going to try and do everything they possibly can to wiggle out of it. Talk to your industry friends and see like, what situations have you run into? What situations are you dealing with, or can you help me figure out how to deal with, or that maybe it didn't end up great for you, so I can think through my contract and how I'll be affected, and then make some tweaks based on those. I tell a lot of my contract clients in my law firm job, like, we're planning for the zombie apocalypse. You know, when people kind of go off the deep end and the people we love are brain-eating zombies and we don't know how they're going to act anymore. So that's one of the things that we're planning for in situations like this. Again, another one that I preach constantly, we have a free download for this too, is get deep, like go dig down. Don't just say like, I'm providing wedding planner services. Dig down into as many specific like deliverables as you possibly can. The more specific your contract, the better. Like, peel back the layers of that onion, you know, peel back when you think you've gotten as specific as you possibly can, go down one more layer, like get in there and do the hard work where you are thinking through what can you essentially commoditize, like what can you put numbers on? That's always very helpful in your, like your scope of work, your packages, that kind of thing. And then honestly, at the end of the day, especially in situations like this, but in any other situation, be aware that most contracts allow for waivers of specific terms. So just because you have something in bold, highlight, and writing, you as a professional, or you as the person that has a right under a contract, usually have the ability to modify that somehow to kind of help your clients out. For example, you know, maybe your cancellation policy does say, for any reason whatsoever, cancellation, we get everything no matter what. You as a holder of that right have the ability to put into writing some sort of compromise there that won't completely invalidate the rest of your contract. So usually that's going to be fine. But always, I guess we're on 6, sorry, but always get any changes in writing. Just get it in writing,
Always have it in writing.
Yeah.
Well, that's great advice. And I think especially when you were talking about peeling back the layers and digging deep and really putting the detail into your contract. And yeah, what's commercially viable? What can you actually, as you say, put numbers on? It makes perfect sense. And I think a lot of us, I know certainly planners, we're nervous about listing out what we're doing. We don't know whether or not people are actually going to value that. And that is ridiculous. Because if it's not there in black and white, then your couple don't know what your responsibilities are. They don't know what it is that you're actually providing them. And then on the flip side of it, it's also something where you can say, actually, you know, I am not responsible for clearing the tables of soccer pieces at the end of the night or whatever it might be, because it's in my contract. So that's usually something I always remind my students of, is the more detail you put in, the better, because then when somebody's being completely unreasonable and asking you to clear all the trash away or do something that really is completely out of your realm of responsibility, you have it there in black and white. So yeah, it's something very hot on when it comes to that type of thing. Well,
Caroline,
Caroline,
my ears.
well, you have been an absolute delight to have on here, and it's been, in all honesty, a relief to speak to somebody who obviously has that legal background, knows what they're talking about, and isn't too, you don't have a problem telling us that you're not sure, because we're in uncharted waters that we've never been in before, and there isn't just a cut and dried on half of this stuff. And that means we're all swimming in the same ocean. We're all under the same sort of banner at the moment. None of us know where we're going. There isn't, as you said earlier on in the conversation, there isn't something you can refer to and say, oh, in this case of XYZ, this was the precedent that was set and this is what happened. We've got nothing to refer to. I mean, goodness, I can't think of anything like this since the plague, and I'm pretty sure they didn't have wedding planners and that type of thing in those days. So we are going back quite a way. So thank you. As I say, I realise you're probably hugely busy right now with all of this going on. So thank you for taking the time. I will be sharing your website with everybody. As Caroline mentioned, she does have templates, and specifically, I think you mentioned that at the moment you've got a postponement template up on your website as well.
We do. We have a postponement template up that provides like some of the language I talked about today. If you don't know certain clauses, or certain things specifics, we've got that up right now. Also, we've got that flow chart, like where am I on my contract? And that's like literally, you don't even have to give me your email. Like it is just posted right up there, just to try and get information out, because I know it's stressful. We've got a resource list as well, as people are kind of putting out information or helpful information. We're trying to link to them. I am a little bit swamped, so I'm only updating like once a day, but
that's great. So you have that there for people to be able to keep referring back to.
Once a day. Yeah, and that's all on the blog as well. So you can dig around and find it there. Then we're trying to keep people updated on Instagram as well, just with like kind of like new things that we're seeing or things that we're realizing or conversations we're having and things like that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it, and we will, as I say, post a link to your website so that people know where they can come to get these templates. And in particular, it's the wording, isn't it? A lot of the time, we just don't know the best wording to use. None of us are legals. We're in the wedding industry. We provide a totally different service. So having somebody who's got those guidelines in place, I would highly recommend that you get something like a postponement template, so you know what you're doing and you've got it there in black and white, and it's going to give you the best possible chance. It might not solve every issue, but at least you've done your due diligence. And as we talked about earlier, you've really done everything that you possibly can. You've shown willing, you've been a problem solver, and you've been trying to come up with a solution that works for both parties. Commercially viable solution, I think you said. So trying to get my legal words right here.
You're good. I mean, I can't make things look cute and pretty, and so we all have our strengths.
Yeah. We do. We definitely do. Well, Caroline, I will let you go. As I say, thank you very much. It's been really illuminating and helpful for us. And I'm sure you're going to have quite a few of the people that have watched this video coming and getting your postponement templates, and probably plenty of others as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Hang in there, okay?
Absolutely.